Hi everybody, this is Chris with Laurel City Historical Fencing. Now recently, for the last month or two, our intermediate class on Friday nights has been focusing on Ott's wrestling, which is one of the masters in the 15th century that talks a lot about, specifically, of course, wrestling, ringen in the German system. And one of the things that I was thinking about is he has a few tactical points in the beginning as kind of his prologue going into techniques. And while of course they apply for wrestling, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how they can apply to other fighting arts, not just wrestling. So I'm going to read a short passage from Jess Finley's book, Medieval Wrestling. This is available at Freelance Academy Press and is an excellent source for medieval wrestling techniques, specifically, of course, in the German tradition. But for anybody interested in any sort of historic wrestling, this is a great resource. I'll probably do a review on this book at some point as well. But I wanted to read just part of Ott's prologue into fighting, into specifically wrestling. In all wrestling, there should be three things. The first is skill, the second is quickness, the third is the proper application of strength. Concerning this, you should know that the best is quickness, because it prevents him from countering you. Thereafter, you should remember that you should wrestle a weaker man in the before, or vor, an equal opponent simultaneously, indes, and a stronger man in the after, or nach. Now, of course, this is something that Ott wrote in the context of wrestling, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how this could be used in other fighting styles, other fighting areas. For a lot of this purpose, I know some of my students will be watching this who do predominantly longsword, and let's face it, the majority of the HEMA community nowadays does longsword. So let's talk about how these things can affect not just wrestling, but longsword and other sword arts. Of course, he says in all wrestling there should be three things, but let's, brush that aside. The first is skill. Obviously, I don't think I have to go too much into explaining that, but a certain level of skill is necessary for any weapons art. You can't just swing around wildly. You need to know the proper way to move, the footwork, the way to cut, thrust, defend, attack, everything. The second is quickness. Of course, in any kind of fight, speed is a factor. Even if you can deliver very technical blows, if you're very slow, you won't have time to get there before your opponent's able to do something. You won't have the ability to react fast enough. So speed is important. I think he continues, so I'll talk about that in a little more later. But the third is the proper application of strength. So this is one that I really wanted to talk about, the proper application of strength. He doesn't just say being strong. It's proper application is implying knowing when to be strong. I see a lot of people, especially beginner fighters, just swing way out of the gate. They just come charging in with a super powerful Oberhau, a very powerful cut or thrust or something, and they're putting too much into it. Proper application, yes, if a technique calls for it, blow through their sword and hit them in the head. However, you want to be cautious when you're fighting somebody, especially applying this, like I said, to sword arts. A sword, you don't get to make mistakes. If you're in a boxing match and somebody punches you once in the face, or you're in a bar fight, somebody punches you once in the face, okay, you can kind of get up from that. One sword hit to the face, the fight's kind of over at that point. So you want to be cautious. What I tend to do a lot of times, especially if I don't know much about who I'm fighting, if I don't know their style, I will go into an attack with strength, yes, but not so much strength to blow past the center line, but I will cut in with strength and stop in long point, somewhere in the center, and then decide where my opponent is going to go from there. Maybe they don't do anything, I hit them. Maybe they give me a little pressure, so I do the winding or the abnamen, whatever the technique calls through, but aggressively with just enough strength to come in and get dominance in the center. So concerning this, you should know that the best is quickness because it prevents him from countering you. So Ott talks about right here, just makes a little comment that quickness is the best of these things. So being fast is important. Obviously, being skilled, being fast, and knowing the proper way to use your strength are all important, but he puts some value on quickness. This can be, of course, applied to other weapon arts because you need to be able to get in there. My point previously about cutting into long point doesn't do you much good if he's already gotten in on you. Now you're reacting too late. Now here's the interesting section that I thought about on this. Now, let me just read this quote again. Thereafter, you should remember that you should wrestle a weaker man in the before, an equal opponent simultaneously, and a stronger man in the after. Now, what I've done personally, this is not canon. This is me applying some of my experience and my study of the art across the board to different things. But what I've found is I basically change out the sense of weaker or stronger in this with skill level of an opponent. So in that case, what I say is you should fence a less experienced man in the before, an equal opponent simultaneously, and a more experienced man in the after. What does this mean exactly? Well, what I say is if you have someone that is less experienced than you, isn't as skilled as you, maybe they're a newer fencer, maybe they just got started, maybe this is one of their first tournaments or their first whatever. Fight him in the before and in the vor. Seize the initiative. The reason being because you're not always sure what he's going to do. So take advantage of that. If you're well trained, you're going to have a very fast cut out of the gate. So come in and take control. Like I said earlier, come into the center line and see what they do. This puts them acting defensively against you and gives you control of the fight. And this way you have less to worry about for them doing something strange because they're not an experienced fencer. The second part of this is saying you should attack an equal opponent simultaneously, indes. Just like I said with when not referring to specifically the weight, but now referring to the experience. If a person is, they've trained with you a lot. I know I do this with a lot of my friends that I train with regularly, like my co-instructor Rob, who I've been training with for just about 14 years now. There's an indes, a during, simultaneous reaction. As soon as I see him move, I move. And then once I use fuel and feeling to feel where his attack is going, where his energy is going, what his intention is, then I respond to that during his attack. So I don't wait for him to come to me. As soon as I see him do something, I get in there. And the last part of this is a stronger man in the after, or knock. I think part of this is with the idea that a more experienced fencer is going to know how to counter everything that you do. If you come at a very experienced fencer with one of the Meisterhau, the master cuts, and you throw a Zornhau at him, he's going to know how to counter that. If you throw a Zverschau at him, he's going to know how to counter that. So let him come to you. Now, that puts you reacting to him rather than taking the initiative, but it's about timing in that sense. So if your opponent is more experienced in coming to you, they're working in the time of the hand and foot. They're having to close distance and attack you. If you simply wait for them to come in, now you have a little bit more time to be able to react, to see what they're doing, to figure out what the right counter can be. Knowing that if you just go in and try to make that first attack, there's a good chance they're going to be able to counter and press the attack right back at you anyway. This gives you a little extra second to be in a strong position, be in guard, to be waiting and ready for them to come in to you and let you react. Now, of course, this is all just my opinion on this. This is just my experience, and your mileage may vary. This isn't true 100% of the time, but it's a good thing to kind of think about. If you're fighting somebody you know they're a little more experienced, just press the attack. If you're going up into a tournament and you're facing an instructor from another school or someone that you know has won medals previously, maybe wait for them, go to long point or flug or ox, some defensive position, and wait for them to close in against you rather than pressing the attack at them, which they will probably knock aside and smack you in the head. Again, your mileage may vary. It'll change, you know, all these kind of... There's this idea of tactical theory and you know, what could work best, kind of like in my last little speech video talking about self-defense and martial arts. There's all these techniques and plans and this and that, and you know, when you do it 1,000 times in drills, it works out perfectly. The odds of that ever happening in real life and working out the way you want them to are not great. But this is just some tactics to think about. This is also something to think about in that a lot of the earlier medieval systems of combat, like the Liechtenauer's whole system, all the masters, all these things are related. So by studying Longsword, you learn how to use a weapon, and you learn timing, distance, you learn the application of the master cuts, the Durchwechselns, the Überlaufens, the basic principles, all these different things. But if that's all you look at in the system, there's other aspects of it that you'll miss. By studying Ott's wrestling, now, of course, there are some wrestlings at the sword that you may encounter, but at the same time, just this little introduction into Ott's wrestling can be an interesting facet to add to your wrestling, or to your longsword work. And of course, all these arts, all the different masters of the Liechtenauer system, all come together. The more you study of all of them, the bigger the picture you'll have, and the better picture you'll have to this. So, let me know below in the comments what you think about this. Do you like the idea of taking what Ott says and applying it to longsword or sword and buckler or messer or poleaxe or anything? I'm sure there's people out there that will say, oh my God, you're wrong. Ringek says, just take the initiative, cut in first, and always do that. And I know, that's one idea, but yeah, let me hear what you say, and maybe try this out yourself. If you disagree with it, besides leaving comments, try it out in sparring yourself. See how it works out for you. Just experiment around with it in a controlled environment where results don't matter as much. So as always, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Visit our website for more information, www.laurelcitysword.com. And don't forget rule number 1, don't get stabbed.